Hello everyone and welcome to my very first episode of Can This Deck Make It into Duel Links? Yes, so this is gonna be a new series of mine that I wanna try to do like maybe every other week or maybe once a month. I don't wanna do it too often because I do think this requires a lot of like research and a lot of patience and a lot of me just talking and rambling about. I mean, if you're here for that, then awesome, but I do want to talk about a lot of archetypes and a lot of cards in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And seeing what the impact can have if they were to be just, suddenly transfer the next following set into Duel Links and, just kind of speculate on if these cards will be powerful in Duel Links. Would they break the game, or would they not do anything at all, or would they just be like a, pretty good deck? Because, Duel Links is an entirely different game from the original, from the OCG and even the TCG. And I do want to just sit down and talk, just like an open discussion with you guys to see if you agree with my own opinion, whether or not a deck can make it into Duel Links and the impact it can have. And for the first video here, for the first segment of my awesome new series, I want to talk about an archetype that's already in Duel Links, but it does not have its entire power yet. And this is going to be the Nekroz archetype. So as you can kind of see here, I have this beautiful little deck here that was actually a more of a cookie cutter staple, like how you would play the deck back in its prime. Because for those of you who don't know, the Nekroz archetype was actually a tier 0 archetype, or it created a tier 0 deck for that format. And it is considered to be one of the most powerful archetypes ever created in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. And yes, the first thing I'm going to talk about is a tier 0 deck. Fantastic. And I'm just going to briefly, quickly talk about the current cards we have in Duel Links. Because Nekroz in Duel Links is not a very good archetype whatsoever. They have essentially almost all of their normal monsters, 1 ritual spell, and 3 of the worst ritual monsters for the archetype. So we actually got pretty shafted with their Nekroz in Duel Links simply because these cards, except for the exception of Kaleidoscope and Dance Princess, none of them ever saw any kind of play in actual Duel Links. And oh my god, my dog just barked. Give me a second. Okay, then false alarm. I think she was just barking at, she thought there might be someone outside. She might bark a few more times. Hopefully it doesn't, take away from the experience here. But in any case, so back into what I was talking about. None of these cards ever saw any actual competitive play, again, besides the Kaleidoscope and Dance Princess. And the reason why, because Dance Princess is actually a really, really good card that I could see being used in Duel Links a lot if we get any more Nekroz ritual monsters. Because her effect is that your opponent cannot respond to any of your Nekroz spell card at all, so they just cannot respond to them, as well as targeting any of your Nekroz ritual monster with card effects. And that is an extremely powerful effect, to be honest, to have in Duel Links. It gets around counter trap cards, it gets around popular cards at the moment like Karma Cut, Enemy Controller, Ballista Squad. Like, it essentially protects your boss monsters. And it's a really, really good card. So if we ended up getting any more Nekroz ritual monsters, then yes, this card I could see it being played in the actual Nekroz ritual strategy. And then the second card, Nekroz Kaleidoscope. The Nekroz archetype actually contains 3 separate different ritual spells. And then Kaleidoscope is, in my opinion, and probably most people would say, is the strongest ritual spell for the Nekroz archetype. The reason why is because this card can use as a normal ritual spell. You tribute monster from your hand or field, but it also has the additional benefit that you can send monster from the extra deck into the graveyard as well for the ritual cost. And that is an extremely powerful effect, because now instead of you having to open not only the ritual spell, the ritual monster, and an additional monster to use as ritual material, now you can just have the ritual spell on the monster and then send any one of your random cards you have in your extra deck, as long as they have a level. Because the thing about the Nekroz that is one of their biggest downsides is that you can only ritual summon them as long as you ritual summon them with the exact level. And even some of the what you call it, like higher level monsters, it's kind of bad to say, but they kind of get shafted also, because they can also be ritual summoned, with exact level, but they cannot use the exact same level for the ritual for it. So if I have a Blue Eyes in my hand, it's a level 8 monster, and I want to summon Valkyries, I cannot use that Blue Eyes for the ritual for the Valkyries, because the Valkyries has the effect that it cannot be ritual summon. It must be ritual summoned without using a level 8 monster. So that's a really big downside to this higher level Nekroz ritual monster. That if you do play the deck, you kind of know the pain of trying to figure out levels here and there. Because if you want to summon Valkyries, you're gonna have to like use double Unicorn or use Shurit. And I'll talk about, like I said, all these cards in a bit. But no, yes, like that's just the bigger downside for the Nekroz, just the higher level monsters there. But Kaleidoscope kind of gets around that a little bit, because it also allows you to summon multiple Nekroz monsters as well, as long as the level of the monster you attributed adds up to the level of the Nekroz monsters. And that is a very strong effect, where, for example, because I have a level 12 here, shooting Quasar Dragon, if I'm able to activate Kaleidoscope, I could send this to the graveyard, and then I could summon both a Nekroz of Valkyries as well as a Nekroz of Unicorn, because both of the level add up to level 12. Because I use a level 12 monster, I'm able to summon them both. So yes, Kaleidoscope, extremely strong, just using your extra deck as material for the ritual summoning. And then, like I said, the rest of these Nekroz cards, outside of maybe Gungnir, are just not the greatest at all. And sadly, we kind of have to play around with this in Duel Links. So let's talk about the cards that you actually want to have for the Nekroz strategy. Now let's go ahead and talk first with the lower level monster, and we're gonna work our way up. And so we're gonna go ahead and talk about Nekroz of Colossalus. So Nekroz of Colossalus, first of all, although the Nekroz ritual monsters have 2 effects, just like the normal monsters, and the effect of the rituals is 1 from the hand and 1 on the field. So the hand effect of the Colossalus is you can discard this card to search any Nekroz spell or trap from the deck to your hand. There are no Nekroz trap cards, so don't worry about that. But the spells, essentially what it does is it lets you search any one of your ritual spells, and it gets you whichever one you need at the time. Very powerful effect. Being a level 3 is easy to summon, and as long as you have another level 3 on the in your hand or on the field, or even in your extra deck, you can just send this. You can just summon this guy, and the monster effect, it is a quick effect that you can target one face-up monster in the field that was special summoned from the extra deck, and negate its effect, and its attack becomes 0 of that target until the end of the turn. Another very common theme on the Nekroz ritual monster is that they're an anti-extra deck monster, archetype. Like you can probably see with Catastor, Gungnir, or even the Decisive Armor. Like, well, these two not so much, but Catastor actually has the effect where if it battles a monster summoned from the extra deck, you can, or any of your Nekroz monsters, my bad, like they instantly get destroyed at the beginning of the damage step. And essentially, the rest of this card some of them will actually interact with your opponent monster that was summoned from the extra deck. So there's Colossalus effect. Let's go ahead and talk about the next one, which is probably one of the most important part of the strategy, which is Nekroz of Unicorn. So Nekroz of Unicorn has the effect that essentially, as long as he's face up on the field, it's a continuous effect where it negates all the effects of all face-up monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck. And that is another extremely powerful effect, but just shutting down essentially anything, from the extra deck. Your opponent's Synchro monster, your opponent's Xyz monsters, if we're talking about just Duel Links. But in the TCG, it cancels out even more than just those two, it cancels out Links and even some Pendulums. So Nekroz Unicorn, it is by far one of the strongest Nekroz monsters in the whole archetype. And then the second effect is hand effect. You can discard it to add back a Nekroz card from your graveyard to your hand. So, really good recycle card. You could use that a lot in the actual Nekroz archetype. It just really depends whether you want him on the field or whatever you want to use him to grab another card from the graveyard. So next we talk about the next monster, which is Nekroz of Bryonic. So Bryonic hand effect is that you can discard him and add any one Nekroz monster from your deck. A searcher that searches any one monster, like, oh my gosh, this deck, the key strategy of the deck, like you're kind of starting to tell, it just searches all over the place. Like, this deck is one of the most consistent decks ever created, just for the fact that you have monsters like Bryonic, Colossalus, even Rhoda, or Reinforcements of the Army, to search up any one of your Nekroz card, essentially. And even your ritual spell, you know, when they're in the graveyard, like I mentioned, you can manage them with another monster to search a ritual spell, essentially. So you are never, ever not going to ritual summon with this deck, because all your cards essentially are here to just always let you have whatever you want to. And even like I said, Unicorn, you can just add back a card from the graveyard. You can get another Bryonic and search again, you know, like there's just so many opportunities for you to never break with this deck because just how many searches they are. But in any case, back to Bryonic. His monster effect is you can target 2 face-up monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck. And if you do, shuffle them into the deck, you know, like just free shuffling, free removal, you know, like this is like targeting non-destructive removal. And those are very, very powerful, even in Duel Links and in the TCG game. And like I said, we'll talk about the whole deck in a minute, but let's just continue on. You know what Gungnir does, that should be in Duel Links. If for those of you who don't know, let's just quickly go over it. You can discard this card from your hand as a hand effect to target one of your Nekroz monsters to prevent it from being destroyed by battle or card effects for the turn. So really, really good protection effect. And then its quick effect, and it has a monster effect. It's a quick effect that you can discard a Nekroz card to then target a card in the field and then you can destroy it. You know, just simple removal, pretty nice. It is not a monster you actually summon a lot. Mostly you want to use it for like the hand protection effect, because again, we're going to talk about the strategy in a minute, but just keep in mind you mostly want to use this card for the protective effect. Next you have the Nekroz of Valkyries, and now that I remember, I think Valkyries is actually in Duel Links as well. Let's just kind of quickly go over with him. So his hand effect is that you can, when the opponent declares an attack, you can discard this card and banish another Nekroz card from your graveyard to negate the attack and end the battle phase. In Duel Links, this is actually an extremely powerful effect, and you know, Valkyrie just ending your battle phase essentially means ending your turn in Duel Links. In the TCG, it's a little bit more lenient, but it is also a very important card that, again, I'll talk about a little bit more once we get to like the overall strategy of the deck. And then finally, for the last remaining of the Nekroz ritual monsters, we're going to talk about the boss monster of the deck, which is Nekroz of Trishula. So Nekroz of Trishula hand effect is that you can, whenever your opponent activates a card effect that targets a Nekroz monster, you can discard this card as a quick effect and negate the activation of that card. Now, that alone already would say, wow, if this was in Duel Links, it would be one of the most powerful hand traps for the Nekroz archetype, considering that, again, Duel Links has Karma Cuts, Ballista Squads, a bunch of cards that just target and do stuff to your cards, and the Nekroz of Trishula could easily just negate the activation, make your opponent waste a card. You know, it's such a powerful effect that I think just by that alone would actually be a really, really good card, like just to have in Duel Links. But that's not all, because then you have his actual monster effect, which is even more broken. It reads that when this card is ritual summoned, you can banish exactly 3 of your opponent's card, 1 from each from their hand, field, and graveyard. Wow, this is essentially the real life, or not the real life, my bad, the synchro version of Trishula. Like right now in Duel Links, we have the Dragon of Imprisoned Mirror, or something along that line. You know, we have the Fusion Trishula monster that is not exactly the best monster card, but then we have the Synchro Trishula that just banishes 3 cards, you know, from the hand, field, and graveyard without targeting. And this guy essentially does the exact same thing as that Synchro monster. However, the only difference here is that this one has to banish 3 cards, while the Synchro Trishula doesn't have to banish all 3 cards. He could only banish 1 if he wants to. He could only banish from the graveyard if he wants to. Like, it is ridiculous. That card is very overpowered, and I don't think we will ever get the Trishula Synchro monster in Duel Links. And even this card, in the Nekroz of Trishula, it is too powerful of a card. Like, I would, just as a spoiler alert, I don't think this card should ever be added into Duel Links, like ever. I think this card is actually too powerful. Like again, I'll talk about the entire archetype at the end of the video, talking about whether or not it could make it into Duel Links. But just at the just to kind of get out of the way, this card should never be in Duel Links. It's too powerful. Let's go ahead and talk about the remainder of the spells, because I want to save the normal monster for last, Shurit. So then we have Nekroz Cycle. So Nekroz Cycle, it is another ritual spell that you can summon your ritual monster by activating monster from your hand or from your hand or graveyard. Wait, hold on a second. You can hand or field. I was reading this wrong. Oh my bad. So yes, it is from your hand or field. I was wondering like, why am I reading graveyard? I'm reading the wrong sentence. But anyways, it's just like a normal ritual spell. However, it also has an additional benefit that you can summon a ritual Nekroz monster from the graveyard or from the hand. So essentially what it does is, if you have a Colossalus, for example, you can ditch it to search the cycle. And then if you have another level 3 on the field or whatever, then you can just activate cycle to resummon, or sorry, to summon that Colossalus from the graveyard. Essentially giving your graveyard as like an extension of your hand, since you can ritual summon any Nekroz monster from the graveyard. That is a very powerful effect, because that means you can recycle your unicorns that you got destroyed. You can resummon the Trishulas that you already used, that it got sent to the graveyard, or use it as a hand trap. Like it does so much for the deck in terms of getting back your resources. And this card probably going to be like my second favorite Nekroz ritual spell, just because the ability to resummon from the graveyard is just too powerful. And then finally we have the Nekroz Mirror, which is just like another basic ritual spell. And however, the additional effect for this is that you can banish Nekroz monster from the graveyard to ritual summon a Nekroz ritual monster. So this is more of a mid to late game, where when you already have your graveyard set up with monsters, you can just banish those so you can summon the ones from your hand. And the way this is very, very powerful with is if you already use the effect of Bryonic and Colossalus. Say you have Colossalus and Bryonic just in your hand. You can send Colossalus to search the mirror. Then you can send Bryonic to the graveyard to search the Trishula. Then you can activate the mirror, banish both Bryonic and Colossalus from the graveyard in order to summon your newly added Trishula from the deck. Like, you see what I mean here? Like, these cards are all consistent. You would never not be able to ritual summon with this deck. This deck is extremely powerful, and there's a reason why it was a tier 0 deck at one point in history. Next, we're gonna go ahead and talk about the next card here, which is Shurit, Strategist of the Nekroz. In my opinion, the very best normal Nekroz ritual monster there is, because it has the simple effect that you can use this card as the entire ritual material for a ritual summon of a Nekroz monster. That on its own is already powerful, because in Duel Links we currently have some Gishki monsters that do the exact same effect but for water ritual monsters. However, Shurit is a archetype specific one that can be searched with cards like Bryonic. It can be searched because a warrior type with cards like Reinforcements of the Army. As well as when it gets tributed, you can add any Nekroz warrior monster from the deck to your hand. And that is one thing we don't have in Duel Links. If you kind of look through the cards we do have, we don't have any of the warriors, because all of the warriors are Colossalus, a searcher, Bryonic, a searcher, and Trishula, the boss monster. So Shurit currently, if you just get added into Duel Links, will have no target to search, but at the very least you can use it to ritual summon any of your Nekroz higher level monster, because it could be used as the entire material, which then bypasses the restriction the high level Nekroz cards have. So yeah, I think Shurit would be an incredible powerful card as long as we actually end up having any of the other warrior Nekroz cards. So that's it for the generic Nekroz support here. And now let's talk about the other support cards the deck played in the TCG. So here, like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the video, it's kind of like a cookie cutter deck profile of like a deck that was played back in like 2015, my bad. of the Nekroz strategy. This is just like a very, very simple one. You know, you have cards like Raigeki, Mythical Space Typhoon, Solemn Scalding. You have Manju. You know, you got a bunch of cards here. So let's just go ahead and talk about the important ones. So first is we have 3 Senjus and 3 Manjus. These are just like generic ritual support. You know, you have Senju who searches for ritual monsters, while Manju searches for either the ritual monster or a ritual spell. The one you always want to see in your opening hand obviously gonna be Manju. But the thing is though, these guys are extremely important because the strategy of the Nekroz was to essentially lock your opponent out from using the extra deck. And the way you do it is through a card like the Jin, Releaser of the Rituals. So when this card is used as the ritual material for a ritual monster, the ritual monster gains the effect that your opponent cannot special summon monster while that card's on the face up on the field. So this is the reason why the Nekroz was tier 0. Just locking your opponent out of special summoning is extremely powerful. Not a lot of decks at the time could handle this sort of oppression, especially because all of the Nekroz monsters, kind of like I was mentioning earlier, have protective effects. Trishula you can discard to prevent a targeting effect, Valkyries you can discard and then vanish to end the battle phase, and Gungnir you can just discard to prevent a destruction from battle and card effect. So all of these cards are literally here to protect the monster that was summoned with the Jin, Releaser of the Rituals. So then your opponent has an even harder time trying to deal with your board that you have here, because the entire deck is consistent. You will, I want to say more than 50% of the time, maybe 70% of the time, will get this effect off on a monster, and then your opponent just can't do anything about it, because another popular card that people were playing back in the Nekroz days was Solemn Scalding. Because you don't play any back row, you can just set this one card and negate essentially anything you wanted by just paying 3,000 life points. And having 8,000 life points in TCG essentially means you can have multiple uses of Solemn Scalding. And you know what? That strategy worked really damn well. It made the deck top tier 0. And on top of that, let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the consistency cards we have here. We have Preparation of Rites. This card's insane for ritual support. It adds a level 7 or lower ritual monster from the deck to the hand, and then if you have a ritual spell in the graveyard, you get to add that card back to your hand. Wow. This card is not a hard once per turn, and it does everything for the deck. Allows you to search 2 cards essentially. Well, search a card, a monster, and then salvage a card. But even if you only search the monster, that's fine. You know, if you have no ritual spells in your graveyard, whatever. Then the cross monsters themselves, you can search Brianna, you can search Colossalus, you can search whatever you need. You know, like I mentioned, this deck is so consistent to the point of unfair. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. And then the last 2 cards I want to talk about before we get to showing you what the deck can do is Herald of the Arclight as well as Lavable Chain. Now these 2 extremely important combo pieces. Herald of the Arclight is an Omni negate on the field that if your opponent were to, if any player gets to send card from the hand or deck to the graveyard, they get banished instead. You never use that effect in this particular deck because the only effect you use is when this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to add a ritual monster or a ritual spell from the deck to your hand, and not hard once per turn as well. And why is that important? Because this card is actually a level 4. Being a level 4 means that if you use Kaleidoscope, you get to send it to the graveyard, special summon Unicorn, and now having a floodgate on the field that, you know, negates all monster effect from the extra deck, as well as you get a free search on top of that. And Unicorn being a level 4 is also extremely important because with him and one of the Manjus allows you to go into Lavable Chain. Lavable Chain is also a key part of the strategy of the Nekroz back in the day because he has the effect that you can detach 1 to send any 1 card from your deck to the graveyard. Having a Foolish Burial type of effect on this card, it is insanely good. And that's the main reason why, again, this deck was top tier, because then you can send the Jin Release or Ritual to the graveyard. And I forgot to mention this, but this guy can be used from the graveyard as part of the material for a ritual summon. So if it's in the graveyard, you already have a level 3 that you can use to summon someone who also is a level 3 named Colossus. And that's how you end up locking your opponent out, essentially, from the rest of the game, and you ended up just winning on the following turns. So let's just go ahead and show you guys exactly what I mean. I'm just gonna do like some hand testing. Let me see, Master Roll 5, high opening hand, yep. Okay, then let's try that again. Sorry about that. There was some bit of a technical difficulty on that last one, but I decided to just kind of get a new hand here, and look at this. This is already an extremely consistent hand for the Nekroz strategy. Like, wow. This is going to be really, really good. So, let's go ahead and start our combo by normal summoning a Manju, activating the effect, and searching a monster. So, for this scenario, because we already have Rhoda, we might want to wait on to add Colossus. So, instead, let's go ahead and add... Let's add the Regis spell. Let's add a Kaleidoscope, shall we? Now, we're going to go ahead and activate Reinforcement of the Army to now search the Colossus. Like I mentioned before, this deck is so consistent, and the main strategy is to try to get the Lavable Chain onto the field, which we will be using our Manju and our Unicorn, because we can just activate Kaleidoscope, like the combo like I was mentioning before, by setting the Archetype, summoning the Unicorn, activating the effect of the Archetype to search a card. In this instance, because we already have Colossus and we haven't activated the effect for it, we're going to search for a protective card. In this instance, let's do a Gungnir, so that way we can be targeted and we can be destroyed. And then we have an Omni again on top of that, like, wow. Now we're going to activate Colossus to search up a Cycle, because we're going to be resummoning again. Because again, the main strategy for this deck is to try to get Lavable Chain onto the field. Detaching to send the Jin to the graveyard, or Jin, or however you pronounce them. Let's go ahead and yep, there you are, like near the bottom of the deck. And now we can activate Cycle by bringing back the Colossus from the graveyard, and because we can use this guy as material from the graveyard, we're just gonna go ahead and banish him, set our Colossus in defense position, we set our 1 Sullen Scalding, and now our opponent has to play around a field where I mean the 1800 Lavable Chains, whatever, but now they have to go over a 2300 defense Colossus that you cannot special summon at all, while trying to deal with a Solemn Scalding, a Trishula that prevents targeting, and a Gungnir that prevents destruction. That is extremely, extremely powerful. It was tier 0 for a reason. Decks could not deal with this sort of oppression, you know, this sort of protective strategy. And like I said, this deck was so consistent because there are so many different searches for the deck. Like, yeah, opening this is pretty bad. But let me see if we can do like the Saxum combo here. Probably not, because we don't have another level 4 into the field. But we can at least search like Bryonic. We can search whatever we want to, you know. We can just activate it again. Go ahead and search anything. Like I said, like we can get a Unicorn too. Like that. Wow, we just set up the graveyard. Go ahead and activate that. You can go ahead and search other cards. And again, like the whole deck is just searches for whatever you want to. Like, doesn't matter what your opening hand is. You're always gonna be searches. Like, look at it. This whole thing is a search hand. I essentially got full combo here again. But no, that's just the power of the Nekroz archetype. And now that I kind of show you guys how that's done, let's talk about how can this archetype be implemented into Duel Links. Oh boy. And alrighty, let's go ahead and talk about what kind of strategy can we implement into Duel Links with the Nekroz archetype. So first things first, like I was mentioning earlier, Trishula should never be allowed to be in Duel Links. Honestly, this card, if it was in Duel Links, it could easily break the game. It will make the Nekroz strategy a potential tier 0. Just because the effect to preventing targeting is already strong, but also the effect of banishing 3 cards from the field, graveyard, and hand is too much for Duel Links to handle. I do not think this card should ever be in it. I hope it's never implemented. Let's not talk about it anymore. So let's talk about the rest of the cards. I think let's talk about the spell cards first, like the ritual spell, because currently we only have 1, and just having 1 kind of really sucks. But the way I do see it is that I do think having access to Cycle and Mirror is not that game breaking for the Nekroz strategy at all. I really don't think these cards could be a potential like bad for any sort of meta. Like, yes, they're just extra ritual cards, you know. And if it were to be added to Duel Links, you know, I could easily see maybe like 2 copies of Kaleidoscope, like 1 copy of Cycle, 1 copy of Mirror at max. You know, like you don't want to add too many ritual spells either, because the deck size is only like what, 20 monsters or 20 cards. Well, minimum 20 cards, maximum 30 cards. So I really don't think people will be adding a bunch of these ritual spells in their deck like we do here in TTG, because their normal ratio is like 2, 2, and 2. So yeah, I don't think it'll be that bad in Duel Links. Next, let's talk about the monsters now. So I do think Colossalus and Brionne could potentially be added into Duel Links. The reason why, because most of the time these guys are going to be used as just searchers, and it is a bit of a tricky situation because they themselves are also very powerful in the fact that they can just prevent your opponent extra deck summoning mechanics, and that could either break or make it meta. It's really hard to kind of say it, just because Brionne himself would actually be maybe a little too powerful now that I think about it. Now that I'm kind of like saying the words out loud. I actually don't think Brionne could make it into Duel Links. And if it's not in Duel Links, I do think Colossalus could actually be in Duel Links. Because searching a spell card is fantastic. And then just being a big booty on the field, you know, that you can still Karma Cut, you know, you can still enemy controller, you know, like it's not the worst card to summon. Yes, having 2300 defense could be a bit of a hard thing to get around if all you are focusing on is like monster effects. But Duel Links has shown that trap cards are really, really good. And as long as we don't have a card like Brionne, I do think Colossalus could be a card that could be added into Duel Links. Along the same lines, Unicorn can actually potentially be added into Duel Links as well. Like, I do think this guy, I mean, the first effect to, you know, discard to add a Nekroz back from the grave to the hand is decent, you know. You're probably never going to use that all that often. But the monster effect to just negate all monsters from the extra deck that are on the field, I think it's good. Just because his stat lineup is only 2300. Being 2300 means that you can easily get run over by a multitude of different cards, you know, multiple different boss monsters. Like right now in Duel Links, like if you just think of like random synchro monster like every, you know, that could get over Unicorn. What else can, like we got a Gojo Guardian that could get over it. We got the Archfiend card could get over it. Like a lot of monsters could easily get over Unicorn. And yes, it sucks having your effects negated, but I don't think it'll be that bad at all. As long as we lose the consistency of the deck and lose the boss monster, I do think Unicorn Colossalus so far can make it into Duel Links. And as well as essentially every single one of their ritual spells, as well as Shurit. You know, why not? Let's just add Shurit into the mix. Because at this point, Shurit could just add as just another card that you can use to summon any of your high level Nekroz monsters, which, you know, we already have in Duel Links. You know, we have the Gichki card that could do exactly what this guy would do, except that he gets an additional effect to search a Nekroz, a warrior monster. And if I say that we could have Colossus in the game, it will only be searching Colossalus. You know, like that. I think that's actually pretty fair. As long as we don't have Brionne and Trishula into Duel Links, I do believe these Nekroz monsters could all, and even the spell cards, could all be implemented into Duel Links safely and not be an overpowering strategy. It will be a consistent, good strategy, but it wouldn't be an overwhelming, hard to get around strategy. On another note, let's talk about the generic support, like we got Preparation of Rise and the Djinn Releaser or Rituals. This card should never be in Duel Links. The Djinn Releaser or Rituals, I'm happy he hasn't been added into Duel Links yet. But as soon as he does, I feel like all these ritual archetype decks, especially Nekroz, if we do get a card like, you know, Colossalus in the game, could just break the game. Like it wouldn't be very fun to go up against at all. Like I do think this card should never be into Duel Links as well. So I hope he never is in it. In the same line, Preparation of Rise is currently in Duel Links. A lot of the ritual decks are not like bad at all. They're just like not top tier. If we give him this extra form of consistency, it could create a big problem. So I do think this type of card should also never be in Duel Links, as well as on the same line as Hurl of the Arclight. Not because it searches the ritual cards, but because it is an Omni-Negate. While it is ritual support, being able to banish cards from your opponent's hand and deck when it gets into the graveyard, and just negating anything for free, like this card should also never be in Duel Links. Like any form of like Omni-Negate, unless it's a counter trap card that requires a lot of life point costs, like Solemn Scalding, or some sort of other kind of like effect, you know, should never be implemented into Duel Links. So I do think Arclight is probably safe to assume is never gonna be into Duel Links. And alongside like the other XC monsters like Lavable Chain, you know what? This guy could probably be in Duel Links. I don't know how much it will break the game, to be honest. And I want to find out how much it can do. Because it is banned in TCG for just being a Foolish Burial. But because Duel Links is far different than the TCG, we've seen cards that perform, you know, excellent in the TCG not transfer well into Duel Links. And I'm pretty sure Lavable Chain could be one of those cards that could potentially not transfer well into Duel Links. So you know what? Give us Lavable Chain. I do think Lavable Chain is a pretty fair card, especially in the context of Duel Links. So I do think that's pretty much it for my analysis of the Nekroz archetype. Again, Brionac and Trishula, if they were to omit those two cards from being into Duel Links, I do think you can add essentially every single card of the Nekroz archetype into Duel Links. And if they do add these guys up at one point, ooh, I'm not gonna. I mean, I'm gonna love it obviously because I love Nekroz, but I could just see them breaking the game to a point where we may want an emergency ban list. But will we ever get these cards in Duel Links? In my personal opinion, I don't think we could ever expect more Nekroz support until after the XC era, because we're currently still releasing the XC monsters into Duel Links as you know, making this video. And until we get to, I want to say, the Pendulum era, like maybe midway through it, we're not gonna see many ritual archetypes making it into Duel Links from here on out. Reasoning why? Because again, you know, we're still in the XC era, we're promoting that summoning mechanic, and by the time we get to the Arc V era, the Pendulum era, that is when the game is definitely going to open its doors to potentially a lot more archetypes. Just because the way Arc V works, like I'm gonna probably talk about this in another video. Just TLDR, I love that era because just how many deck revival and the different type of strategies they were played within that era of Yu-Gi-Oh. And like I said, I'll talk about this more in a later video. But for now, let's just say that not all of the Nekroz cards could make it into Duel Links. That is my own personal opinion. If you guys want to talk about it in the comment section, let's go ahead and do that. But I do hope you like this style of videos. It's just like raw, just reaction on whether or not cards could be implemented into Duel Links or not, as well as the strategy they were played with in the TCG, and seeing if they can transfer into Duel Links. Like I do think if we get all the cards into the Duel Links, it will be too much. Literally, it will be way too many. It will be too much. Again, I do hope you enjoy it. Leave any feedback on this video series, and just tell me, you know, your thoughts on things. You know, just talk to me if you guys need to, because I am looking to improve. I am looking to upload consistently as much as I can. You know, with COVID and everything, I have a little bit of free time here and there, but I do hope you guys do keep up with the content I make in the future. And again, thank you very much for all of you who stick around and watch this video. Any tips, again, I would highly appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys on another video. So long.